Good afternoon, class. This is John. Following up, I told you in class that I would be trying to put together the screencast so that we could sort of keep pace with the class. Didn't get quite as far as I wanted to today, and that's actually fine. I don't mind falling behind a little bit if it's for the sake of a good conversation or some good questions that we have to answer. Nonetheless, we want to keep up with our pace so that we get where we want to be in this first week of class together. So anyway, I'm going to just show you, these are slides that I had up already to sort of help guide us through our course today. We spent some time talking about the North Star, meaning the overarching purpose of our class, our learning experience together. I just shared with you there the objective. And then we started talking about some important terms that geographers use. And I started to try to draw these distinctions yesterday in my comments. The difference essentially between location and place. And an important related term is when we talk about a place or we talk about a region, we can really apply that in a number of different ways, but we have to be mindful that places and regions have scales, meaning they can be large regions or large places. I mean, large scale, which would mean actually a smaller overall place. We talked a little bit about the importance of remembering that scale is a ratio. Or we can be talking about small scale places or regions as well. So as you move through here, I want you to bear in mind how we use these terms. A place also is something that has significance. It's a location that a person or a group of people attaches significance to. So one person's place might not be another person's place. Another way of saying that, one person's place might be just another person's location, because that special significance is what makes a place a true place. So location is another important term. Geographers use location a lot, but we usually refer to location a couple different ways. Pardon me. First, there are absolute locations, and absolute locations are locations that are determined by coordinates of longitude and latitude. So for being very formal, and geographers sometimes are formal, we want to identify a specific place on Earth. We can do that with absolute locations, and that would be a listing like here. We have the location of Walla Walla Community College, which is 46 degrees, 3 minutes, 54 seconds north latitude, and 118 degrees, 19 minutes, 49 seconds west longitude. Those are the X and Y coordinates that determine the absolute location of Walla Walla Community College. For most of us, though, in our everyday lives, we use what is relative location. So we describe a location or a place based on its relative proximity to something else. So for example, Walla Walla is roughly 160 miles east-southeast of Olympia, Washington. And you can kind of see that relationship here as you look at the state of Washington's map. So those are important things to be thinking about as we move forward. A little further with longitude and latitude, we know that they're important concepts, geographic concepts for helping us determine things like locations. And most of you, I'm sure, have at least a basic understanding of longitude and latitude. But if we start, we'll start by looking at latitude, and I'll use the mouse to help us. So here we have the equator, which is the most important parallel of latitude. And parallels, as they sound, are parallel to one another. So you see these different lines of latitude that are parallel to one another. And they're all each degree of latitude, not those lines that I just showed, because those represent increments of 10 degrees of latitude. But each degree of latitude on Earth's surface is about 69 miles removed from that next to it. It's not perfect across the board because the shape of Earth is not a true sphere. It's actually a little bit distorted. It's an oblate spheroid. But we're really close to about 69 miles per degree of latitude, so between these parallels. And of course these parallels don't actually exist on the Earth. They are inventions that geographers have used throughout time to help understand and distinguish distance and locations on Earth's surface. But it's worth noting these parallels of latitude, they circumvent the Earth at different degrees latitude. And obviously the physical conditions on Earth differ as one proceeds farther north to higher degrees of north latitude, or in the southern hemisphere as one proceeds farther south toward higher degrees of southern latitude. Okay, so really important, useful tools for helping us understand that. By contrast, there are meridians. Meridian lines are those which run north-south and represent different degrees of longitude. And so if you look at this globe, you'll see the prime meridian, which is the most important meridian of longitude, runs through Greenwich, England, and circumnavigates the globe north-south and cuts across the Pacific Ocean at its opposite end. So if you imagine the Earth cut in these two specific halves, there are 180 degrees of east longitude and 180 degrees of west longitude, depending on which direction you proceed. So east longitude, west longitude, proceeding from the prime meridian. With lines of meridian, it's not quite as simple. They are 69 degrees apart, each single degree of longitude at the equator, but because the Earth, of course, is shaped as a sphere, as these lines of meridian approach the poles, both north and south, they become closer and closer to one another. Okay, so we'll call that good for now. But let's spend some time talking about scale. We've discussed this a little bit in the context of those earlier maps. So scale, again, to be reminded, it's a ratio. So what makes a large-scale map is the ratio and its relative size compared to a different scaled map. So again, that map of Walla Walla Community College is a large-scale map because it represents roughly, this is different from what I said in class today, each one, call it inch or foot, corresponds with 2,640 inches or feet, depending on the units you use. What you see is 1/2,640th of the actual area depicted by the map. So this is a large-scale map. Even though that ratio creates a fairly small number, it's nothing compared to this small-scale map of the state of Washington. And this just appeared off of the screen, but this is a roughly 1 to 1,584,000 ratio. So that 1 foot that's represented on the screen is actually representing like 1.6 million feet of reality. Okay, so again, I'm sorry to beat a dead horse there, but this is a really important concept. Pardon me. So the term region is one that oftentimes hinges upon what scale we're talking about. Are we talking about a large-scale region, or are we talking about a small-scale region? We didn't get to this in class today, but had we gotten to it, I would have had you folks come out and try to attempt the following activity. But first, let's just say our course and its title, World Regional Geography, we are actually engaging in a small-scale use of the term region because our regions are very small scale. They encompass things as large as all of North America, or all of South America, or all of Europe, or all of Sub-Saharan Africa. Those are small, that's a small scale use of the region. Our regions are of very small scale for the use of this course. But regions don't have to be small scale, and this activity is designed to help you appreciate that. So the term here, and it's just off the screen probably again, is downtown Walla Walla. I've put this map up here. If you were to try to determine what the region or area of downtown Walla Walla is, we might all describe this a little bit differently. We might draw a different boundary. And you could attempt to draw the boundary on this map with your finger if you like. But this is actually a large-scale area or a large-scale region, downtown Walla Walla. We use this phrase probably all the time, but we don't usually stop to identify specifically what we mean by the phrase downtown Walla Walla. Well, here's one way that we could define downtown Walla Walla. These are the parking areas that our city uses for assessing parking permits. And so that works as a pretty good definition, right? This is how that specific phrase downtown Walla Walla is defined by the city for the purposes of assessing its different parking permits. Okay, hopefully you can kind of make that out and see what's meant by that. And who knows, maybe that differed, maybe it didn't differ much from your original effort at defining downtown Walla Walla. Moving on to a smaller scale region, here we have the phrase Washington wine country. Here's a map of the state of Washington. People might define this a little bit differently. How would you define what is meant by the term wine country as it's applied to the state of Washington? Well, you might take your guess. Could be, you think of it as the Walla Walla Valley or the Columbia Valley. But here's a pretty common way for wine producers to refer to this sort of signature or appellation of wines. I think you could take these little valleys, which are actually oftentimes prominently featured on wine bottles, and use this as a way of defining what Washington wine country is. Again, this is a smaller scale region than downtown Walla Walla. Moving on, getting to a smaller scale still, how would you define the Pacific Northwest? Again, a phrase that's used pretty regularly. This is a smaller scale region, and oftentimes it's defined as this: Montana, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. Not everyone defines it that same way, but you can see that this is a area or region, and it is of a smaller scale, and this is how it's defined. Moving on, let's go to a smaller scale region yet. How would you define Latin America? Okay, all right, well, think that through. What do you think is meant by the phrase Latin America? Some people define this differently, but a common definition is every part of the Spanish-speaking world south of the United States border. Okay? That could be problematic because Brazil technically isn't Spanish-speaking, it's Portuguese-speaking. And you'll see here we have French and British Guiana there in the north-central part of South America. But again, hopefully this works to help you understand and appreciate small-scale versus large-scale regions. So in summary, let me leave you with this. Regions have the following traits, kind of like places. It's a area of Earth's surface, unit of Earth's surface, that has certain features. Some of these could be physical features. It could also be human features, like language, so on and so forth. So with that, I will stop and look forward to seeing you tomorrow.